Flight crew laughs at black woman in business class until she pulls out their termination letters. There are stories you hear that make you stop and question everything you thought you knew about human decency. This one begins in the plush seats of a business class cabin on a United Airlines flight, where a confident black woman settles in for what should be a routine trip. Little does anyone know, a chain of events will unfold that exposes arrogance, prejudice, and raw injustice, only to flip on its head in the most shocking way. When the flight crew targets the wrong passenger and mocks her behind thinly veiled smiles, they have no idea who they are truly dealing with. Amanda Johnson quietly stepped onto the air bridge connecting to the Boeing 777 headed from New York's John F. Kennedy International Airport to Los Angeles International Airport. She clutched her sleek black carry-on and wore a beige trench coat that exuded understated elegance. Despite the crisp confidence she carried, Amanda was no stranger to sideways glances when she walked into spaces people assumed she didn't belong. As a tall black woman, wearing her hair in a beautiful halo of natural curls, she had navigated a lifetime of microaggressions. But today felt different. Today was supposed to be a new beginning. She was returning from a corporate summit in Manhattan, where she had just been promoted to a powerful role in the executive hierarchy of a major conglomerate. The details of her promotion were confidential, known only to the highest level insiders, but Amanda hadn't needed the job title to command respect. She carried herself with the same self-assured posture she'd had for years, even when others insisted on trying to tear her down. Once on board, Amanda glanced at her first-class boarding pass again, confirming her seat number in business class. This was a last-minute flight, and most of first class had been booked by the time her assistant arranged her travel. She didn't mind. Any seat with enough legroom and a quiet environment to read was good enough for her. Even so, she was in a higher cabin class than many people were used to seeing her in, something Amanda rarely forgot. A flight attendant's voice echoed softly from behind her. "Ma'am, can I help you?" The question was all polite surface, a veneer Amanda recognized. She heard the faintest trace of disapproval. Amanda turned to see the flight attendant, a tall woman with a pinned blonde bun and slightly forced smile, scanning Amanda up and down. "No, thank you," Amanda said, politely but firmly. "I'm all set, just making sure I find my seat correctly." As Amanda approached row 4, she heard stifled laughter from another member of the cabin crew standing near the front galley. He was whispering something to the blonde attendant, who nodded with a small smirk. Amanda felt her cheeks tighten. She'd seen that look before. At times, flight attendants had assumed she couldn't possibly be in business class, concluding she must be lost or confused. She wondered if today would be another routine check of her boarding pass, or if it might escalate into something more. She stowed her carry-on in the overhead bin. Instantly, she sensed eyes on her from multiple directions, one set belonging to a white-haired businessman in a seat across the aisle, another from a younger man with big headphones behind him. Amanda offered a polite smile to the older passenger as she settled into her seat, crossing her legs at the ankle with an unruffled elegance she had perfected. Moments later, the blonde flight attendant approached with a tray of pre-departure beverages. "Would you care for a mimosa or some champagne, miss?" The attendant trailed off, expecting Amanda to supply her name. Amanda gazed up calmly. "Johnson." "Amanda Johnson," she responded, ensuring her voice carried a warmth but also an unmistakable confidence. "I'll have water, please." The attendant hesitated, her eyes narrowing slightly, as though something wasn't quite adding up. "All right, Miss Johnson," she said. She offered Amanda a bottle of water and moved on to the next passenger. Amanda didn't let the subtle tension get to her. She turned to look out the window, letting the cabin's soft hum lull her into thought. She knew that the next few hours could be spent in peaceful reflection or filled with confrontation. Which path the flight took depended on how far the flight attendants decided to push their assumptions. Still, Amanda had no idea just how pivotal this flight would become. She certainly couldn't anticipate the final showdown that waited at 35,000 feet. If she had, she might have braced herself differently for the turbulence that had nothing to do with weather. In the forward galley, the blonde flight attendant, Kelly Monroe, was rechecking the manifest on her tablet. Her colleague, Tim Walters, a senior flight attendant with nearly a decade of experience, sidled up next to her. Tim had a nervous habit of tugging at the collar of his uniform whenever he felt uneasy. "Kelly, who's that in 4A?" he asked under his breath. "She doesn't look like the usual business class type." Kelly peered at her tablet, scrolling through the passenger list. "Amanda Johnson," she read. "Says she's with Sterling Clark Holdings, some corporate entity. Paid ticket, not an upgrade or anything." Tim rolled his eyes. "It's surprising, that's all," he said, lowering his voice again, though the low hum of the plane made it hard for anyone beyond the galley to catch their conversation. "I mean, she looks like not your typical business traveler," Kelly smirked. "I know. I had a weird feeling about her. She was so confident when I asked for her name. Almost like she was expecting trouble." Tim shrugged, though the curiosity in his eyes didn't wane. They exchanged a subtle glance that Amanda, even if she'd been in earshot, would have recognized immediately. Amanda had seen it on countless faces at airports, upscale restaurants, and corporate events. The momentary confusion when someone's deeply ingrained biases are challenged. A few minutes later, Kelly and Tim moved through the cabin, assisting passengers to place carry-ons in overhead bins and offering refreshments. They kept an eye on Amanda, expecting something to happen. Maybe she'd press the call button with an impossible request, or try to find an excuse to go forward into first class. Some passengers of color in premium cabins, they believed, acted overly entitled to prove they belonged. But Amanda didn't do any of that. She simply sat quietly, sipping her water, occasionally glancing at her phone. She chatted politely with a father traveling with his teenage daughter in the row behind her, offering them a reassuring smile as they wrangled their backpacks. Meanwhile, Kelly and Tim's confusion morphed into a perverse desire to expose Amanda as a fraud. Even if Amanda had a legitimate ticket, they thought, there must be some angle, some reason she seemed so well versed in high-end travel despite not fitting the mold they expected. Across the aisle in 4B, a middle-aged man in a crisp suit typed feverishly on his laptop. Amanda caught him glancing at her more than once, and every time their eyes met, he looked away, as if embarrassed. Amanda wasn't new to this. After a lifetime of being the only black woman in certain rooms, she had developed an almost sixth sense for subtle discomfort and suppressed curiosity. It was precisely that sixth sense that told her something bigger was brewing behind the flight attendant's forced smiles. The plane door closed with a clank, and the captain's voice came over the intercom, welcoming everyone aboard United Airlines Flight 478 to Los Angeles. Amanda leaned back, fastening her seatbelt. She allowed herself a moment to exhale, determined to focus on reading a contract. She'd been sent from her new boss at Sterling Clark Holdings. Her promotion to Vice President of Corporate Ethics and Human Capital, an internal oversight role that included hiring and firing across multiple business units, was more than a career milestone. It symbolized everything Amanda had fought for: recognition of her competence, authority, and her unwavering moral code. And ironically, Amanda's newly minted position gave her the power to overhaul entire departments, particularly those prone to discrimination or harassment. If she discovered unethical conduct, she could sign off on direct, sweeping terminations. She had no inkling that this flight crew's attitude would soon become Exhibit A in a drama that would test every shred of her resolve. The aircraft taxied out to the runway, and Amanda gazed out the window at the receding lights of the New York skyline. She thought about how different her life had become in the past year. A small pang of nostalgia rose in her chest. She remembered her humble beginnings, the long hours waitressing in college, and the repeated job interviews where she'd been told she was overqualified or not the right fit. Now, here she was, traveling in business class, entrusted with major corporate decisions that could change the course of entire departments and employees' lives. As the plane sped down the runway, Amanda closed her eyes, letting the familiar sensation of takeoff settle her racing mind. She had no idea how soon her new responsibilities would land on her lap, quite literally, before the flight even touched down in Los Angeles. A couple of hours into the flight, the cabin lights were dimmed to let passengers rest or watch in-flight movies. Amanda was leafing through her file on an upcoming merger Sterling Clark was pursuing. She wore noise-cancelling headphones, but even so, she couldn't help but notice Tim, the male flight attendant, standing in the aisle not too far from her seat, openly staring. When Amanda removed one earpiece, Tim snapped to attention. "Are you enjoying your flight, Miss Johnson?" he asked, as though he'd just then decided to approach. The question seemed polite enough on the surface, but his tone was laced with a curious, almost accusatory edge. "It's been fine," Amanda replied. "Could I get a refill on my water when you have a chance?" She offered a smile, something warm, but not subservient. She wanted to keep the peace. Tim nodded, but instead of moving on to fetch the water, he lingered. "You travel for business often?" he pressed, eyes raking over the documents on her tray table. "Fairly regularly," Amanda said, curtly this time. She folded the top page of her documents, not wanting him to read anything sensitive. "I work in corporate oversight." "Corporate oversight," Tim repeated, cocking his head. "Is that like auditing?" Amanda paused, uncertain how much to divulge. She didn't owe him an explanation of her job. But she also didn't want to stoke the tension further. "Human resources, compliance, that sort of thing," she said. "Just making sure policies and ethical standards are upheld." Tim's lips twisted in a small grin. He nodded absently, as if he'd just confirmed a private suspicion. "Right," he said, though clearly not satisfied. Then, almost as an afterthought, he tacked on a quick, "Let me get you that water," before stepping away. Amanda leaned back in her seat, forcing her shoulders to relax. She had an uneasy feeling that Tim was looking for a reason to engage. Perhaps he wanted to prove to himself that Amanda was out of place. Amanda willed herself to stay calm. She was more than used to casual microaggressions, but she also sensed something deeper in Tim's behavior, something sharper than mere curiosity. A few minutes later, Kelly, the blonde flight attendant, came by. She knelt next to Amanda's seat so they could speak softly. "Miss Johnson," Kelly said, "I noticed you have some important-looking papers there. We have extra reading lights if you need them." Amanda nodded politely. "Thanks, I'll keep that in mind. I'm fine for now." Kelly lingered, just like Tim had. She glanced sideways at Amanda's overhead bin, as if expecting to see something out of place. "Are you traveling alone?" Kelly ventured. Amanda raised an eyebrow. "Yes," she said, "just me." Kelly's eyes flitted to Amanda's ring finger, noticing Amanda's bare hands. "No family with you today?" she pressed. Amanda bristled internally at the invasive question, but forced a diplomatic answer. "No, my family is at home. I'm traveling for business." A tense beat passed between them. Finally, Kelly nodded and excused herself with a tight smile. Amanda couldn't help but wonder if Kelly and Tim were piecing together some narrative that Amanda had used a stolen credit card or racked up miles in suspicious ways. Amanda had read countless stories of black travelers getting asked to deplane or show additional identification for the flimsiest reasons. About an hour later, as Amanda was drifting off with her headphones on, she heard raised voices. She removed her headphones again, Tim was talking to a passenger near the front who was refusing the meal service. The passenger, a middle-aged white woman wearing a plush cardigan, seemed flustered. Amanda overheard snatches of the conversation. "Look, I paid for a seat and I want the meal." The woman insisted. "But I want the vegetarian option. You said it was available when we boarded." Tim's voice was tight, trying but failing to maintain composure. "MAAM, the vegetarian meals are limited. If you didn't request it ahead of time, we might be out." The woman was growing more agitated. "I did request it when booking. This is unacceptable. I always fly business class, and I've never been denied my meal preference before." Kelly joined them, trying to smooth things over, but the woman was determined to file a complaint. Tim cast Amanda a sour look, as though Amanda's presence itself had contributed to the shortage. It made no logical sense, but in that moment, Amanda realized that Tim's frustration with the other passenger might spill over into further hostility toward her. Prejudice often looks for convenient scapegoats. When the dispute subsided, Amanda saw Tim and Kelly retreat to the galley, presumably to talk about more than just meal preferences. Amanda caught the way Tim's arms flailed as he spoke. Kelly placed a hand on his shoulder in an attempt to calm him. Whatever was being said, Amanda sensed it involved her. There was an energy in the air, palpable, crackling. Throughout the next hour, Amanda tried to refocus on her work. She had crucial decisions to make regarding the restructuring of one of Sterling Clark's subsidiaries. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that this flight was heading for some kind of confrontation. Years of dealing with covert and overt racism had honed her instincts like a barometer before a storm. Sure enough, halfway through the flight, Amanda saw Tim and Kelly exchanging glances as they looked at her seat. The older passenger in 4B also seemed to be eavesdropping on whatever they were discussing, occasionally nodding in Amanda's direction. She wondered if he was a part of it or just a passive observer. She recalled something her mentor once told her: "Power is often invisible until it's challenged, and the people who rely on assumptions of their own power will lash out the hardest when they feel threatened by someone who breaks the mold." Amanda had never forgotten those words, and at that moment they felt prescient. The seatbelt sign dinged on, and the pilot's voice announced slight turbulence ahead. Amanda fastened her belt and closed her eyes, inhaling slowly. Outside the window, the sky was dark, and occasional flashes of lightning appeared far in the distance, illuminating the rolling clouds beneath them. A storm was indeed coming. Up in the galley, Kelly braced herself as the aircraft hit a patch of turbulence. She clutched the side of a storage compartment while Tim rummaged through a manifest on the counter. "Why are you so bothered by her?" Kelly asked, referring to Amanda. "She's not the only passenger here you don't recognize." Tim scowled. "She's just—" "I have a bad feeling. I'm telling you, she's not who she says she is." Kelly frowned. "She didn't actually say who she is, just that she's in corporate oversight. Maybe she's some big shot. Could be a senior executive or something." "Exactly. And how does a senior executive with that background act so... Tim stammered, hunting for the right word. "So comfortable? She's wearing simple clothes, no designer handbag. She's not even traveling with an assistant or anything." Kelly cocked her head. "That's what's bugging you? Maybe she's just not flashy. So what?" Tim glanced at Kelly with an exasperated look. "She's in a seat that usually goes to either top-tier frequent flyers or wealthy professionals. She's not chatty, she's guarded about her documents. I don't know, Kel. Something's off." Kelly shrugged, though she too had an uneasy feeling, though hers was more about Tim's hostility. "Let it be," she finally said. "Unless she's causing trouble, we should do our jobs. We don't need to be the cabin cops." But Tim wasn't convinced. He signaled Kelly to follow him to the corner of the galley, away from prying ears. "Remember last year, that fiasco with the stolen credit card? That couple who got on board with tickets purchased illegally. Tim's voice went low. We got in trouble for not catching it before departure. Kelly nodded slowly, recalling how upper management had grilled them for allowing passengers onto a flight with fraudulent payment methods. That fiasco had created waves within their flight attendant ranks. The airline had tightened protocols for suspicious behavior. "We can't just assume this woman's ticket is stolen," Kelly said in a hushed tone. "If we're wrong," Tim cut her off. "If we're right, we look like heroes. And if we're wrong, well, then she's just an innocent passenger who'll forget about it by the time she lands. People get randomly checked all the time." Kelly hesitated. She didn't want to end up in a confrontation, and something about Amanda's demeanor told her that Amanda was not someone to be trifled with lightly. But Tim's relentless suspicion was wearing her down. He was a more senior flight attendant, and if she didn't back him, it could create friction. She let out a small sigh. "Fine," she said, "but handle it carefully. Don't just go in guns blazing. We'll ask for a quick verification, maybe check her seat details again. If everything's legitimate, we drop it." "Got it." Tim nodded curtly. "Got it." He looked triumphant, as though he had been waiting for Kelly's green light. "We'll do this discreetly." With that, Tim and Kelly commenced a plan to subtly verify Amanda's status, though how subtle they would actually be was anyone's guess. Meanwhile, Amanda felt her stomach tighten despite the smoothness of the flight at that moment. She was aware of the conversation in the galley, soft voices, but telling tones. Her intuition blared in alarm. She decided to remain calm. After all, there was nothing to hide. Her ticket was purchased through her corporate travel program, all above board. But Amanda also knew that some flight attendants, when motivated by bias, could twist anything into an incident. She remembered the recent training materials she had read through at Sterling Clark about workplace discrimination. Prejudice in the service industry had led to too many lawsuits and tarnished reputations. Amanda had been a part of the team that recommended stricter consequences for such behavior. If only these flight attendants knew they were messing with someone who had more than a passing knowledge of corporate accountability. As Amanda sat, rereading a crucial passage about restructuring in her documents, Tim approached with forced geniality. "Mr. Johnson," he said, leaning in slightly, "I wonder if I could ask you a quick favor. Could I verify your seat number and see your boarding pass? We're just doing a routine check." Amanda's lips parted in surprise. "A routine check?" she repeated, arching an eyebrow. "I was checked at the gate." Tim nodded. "Yes, but sometimes gate checks miss a detail. Our software shows a mismatch for seat 4A. Nothing serious, just housekeeping." Amanda's heart pounded, but she maintained her composure. "Certainly," she said, pulling out her boarding pass from the seat pocket. "You'll find everything in order." Tim took the boarding pass, his gaze flicking to Amanda's name, the flight details, and the seat assignment. Amanda noticed him stifle a frown when he found no discrepancy. Then he quickly scanned the form of payment, though Amanda's pass only showed the last 4 digits of the card used. Amanda's lips thinned. She knew it was unusual for a flight attendant to demand to see a passenger's method of payment mid-flight, especially in business class, without cause. After a moment, Tim handed it back. "Thanks." "Like I said, routine check," he said, but his tone was anything but friendly. Amanda looked him straight in the eye. "All good?" Tim paused. "All good," he finally said, offering a tight smile. "Enjoy the rest of your flight, Miss Johnson." As Tim walked away, Amanda inhaled and exhaled slowly. She repeated a mantra in her mind. "Stay calm, stay gracious, but never let them walk all over you." She could sense the tension radiating off Tim like heat waves, and she knew that if he found any excuse to escalate, he wouldn't hesitate. Not long after the boarding pass check, Amanda decided to stretch her legs. She headed to the business class lavatory, noting that Tim was tending to a passenger near the front. while Kelly busied herself with reorganizing the beverage cart. The seatbelt sign was off, and the plane was currently slicing through calm skies. Perfect time for a quick break. When Amanda emerged from the lavatory, she heard voices drifting from behind the partially closed curtain that separated the galley from the passenger aisle. She recognized Kelly's voice, and then Tim's. She paused in the aisle, leaning slightly, not intending to eavesdrop, but catching words that made her freeze. "Still sure something's off about her," Tim was saying, his voice laced with disdain. "Just because her past checks out doesn't mean she's not up to something. You see, the way she acts, like she owns the place." Kelly sighed. "Tim, let it go. If there was a mismatch, we'd see it in the system." Then Tim's voice sharpened. "These people always have a way of getting around the rules. I've seen it before, flashing attitude and playing victim. I'll bet she's just waiting to cry racism so she can get a voucher or something. She knows all the angles." Amanda felt her gut clench. These people. She knew exactly what that meant. Her cheeks burned as the weight of the words sank in. Her initial instinct was to barge in and confront them, but she held back, letting them continue to talk, suspecting she might need to hear everything. Kelly made a faint sound of discomfort. "Tim, stop it. You're being paranoid. Besides, it doesn't matter even if she complains. Management is always on the passenger's side these days." Tim's voice lowered, filled with frustration. "She waltzed on here like royalty. It's so annoying. She doesn't belong in business class, and we both know it." Silence stretched, thick with tension. Amanda swallowed hard. As a high-level HR executive, she'd seen these sorts of attitudes ruin careers, tarnish company reputations, and bring about lawsuits. Yet hearing it so blatantly from someone who was supposed to be providing professional service took her breath away. Her hands shook, not with fear, but with a controlled fury she rarely felt so powerfully. She considered stepping forward, letting them see that she'd heard them. But a calmer voice in her head urged caution. She retreated back down the aisle, returning to her seat with measured steps. She didn't want them to know she'd overheard. Not yet. As she sank into her seat, Amanda felt a swirl of emotions: hurt, anger, disbelief. But above all, a resolution began crystallizing in her mind. You just messed with the wrong passenger. She recalled the newly updated policies she and her team had drafted at Sterling Clark. The corporation owned or invested in various ventures, including partial stakes in certain airlines' operations, especially those that formed strategic partnerships. She had in her laptop case the contract that outlined these relationships, which gave Sterling Clark Holdings certain oversight privileges. She hadn't delved into the specifics about United Airlines, but she was well aware that the sphere of influence was broad, particularly with code-share agreements and cross-industry partnerships. If Tim and Kelly thought Amanda was powerless to challenge their bigotry, they were in for a shock. Amanda only needed the slightest reason to invoke her authority, especially if any airline staff was found to be discriminating. She had never intended to use her power so directly, but life had a way of setting up karmic collisions. She steadied her breathing, thinking ahead to how she might handle this. One thing was certain: Amanda would not quietly endure the insult. She would gather evidence, remain poised, and take swift action once she landed. Because prejudice like this thrived only when it was left unchallenged. The seatbelt sign chimed on again, and the captain announced more turbulence. Amanda fastened her seatbelt, her heart pounding. Outside the window, the plane had entered thicker cloud cover. She glanced at the flight tracker on the screen in front of her. They were approaching the halfway mark, somewhere over the Midwest. The next couple of hours suddenly felt like a lifetime. She closed her laptop, deciding to rest. As she tried to calm her swirling thoughts, Amanda's mind drifted to a memory from years ago, when she was a new college graduate, traveling on a cheap economy ticket. She'd been humiliated on a flight when a flight attendant singled her out, demanding to see her ticket 3 separate times. She remembered how small she felt then, how powerless. But she wasn't powerless anymore. As Amanda adjusted her seat, she opened her phone's note-taking app and jotted down the key phrases she'd overheard. She documented the approximate times, the flight attendants' names, and the context. Over the years, she'd learned the importance of keeping a record. She didn't know yet how or when she'd confront them, but she wanted every fact straight. A few minutes later, Kelly passed by again. Her demeanor was more subdued now, as though guilt or caution were getting the better of her. She offered Amanda a closed-lipped smile, then busied herself with picking up trash from trays. Amanda returned the smile coolly, giving no sign that she'd overheard their conversation. Let them think everything is normal, she thought. Any trash, Miss Johnson? Kelly asked, avoiding eye contact. I'm fine, Amanda said, placing a gentle emphasis on the last word. Kelly nodded and moved on, disappearing behind the curtain. Amanda exhaled. She had to maintain her composure for the rest of the flight, no matter what they threw at her. She had a far more potent tool at her disposal than anger, the power to bring about consequences. The turbulence outside matched the unease inside Amanda. She tried to refocus on her reading, but every few minutes her mind wandered back to the bigoted comments. Part of her wanted to confront Tim and Kelly then and there, to read them the riot act about professional conduct and the airline's own anti-discrimination policies. But Amanda knew that standing up in the cabin and unleashing her fury might not achieve the outcome she desired. She needed a measured response, one that left no room for their denials. Half an hour later, Amanda decided to walk to the galley at the rear of business class, not the forward one, where Kelly and Tim seemed to congregate. She hoped to find a different flight attendant, perhaps someone more sympathetic or at least neutral. She wanted to ask for a refill on her water and see if anyone else on the crew was friendlier. As she made her way back, the plane jolted with a sudden bump of turbulence, causing Amanda to hold onto the seat backs. She nearly collided with a flight attendant she hadn't noticed before, a petite woman with dark hair and a comforting smile. Her name badge read Maria. "Careful there," Maria said gently, steadying Amanda by the elbow. "Sorry," Amanda murmured, regaining her footing. "I was just looking for some water." Maria nodded. "No worries, I can get that for you." She guided Amanda to a small space near the galley, rummaging for a fresh bottle of water. "You doing okay otherwise? It's a bit bumpy." Amanda let out a breath. "I'm all right, thanks." She paused, then decided to risk a little honesty. "The other flight attendants in business class, they seem a bit tense. Everything okay?" Maria's face flickered with a complicated emotion. She lowered her voice. "They've been under a lot of stress, Tim especially. But I'm sorry if it's affecting your experience. Do you need me to talk to them?" Amanda hesitated, scanning Maria's earnest expression. Maria seemed sincere, but Amanda didn't want to drag her into something that could escalate further without proof or a plan. "I appreciate that," she said quietly. "I'm just trying to have a peaceful flight. It's just felt off." Maria handed her the water with a small smile. "I understand. If there's anything you need, you can ask me directly. I'm here to make sure you're comfortable." Amanda nodded, touched by Maria's concern. "Thank you," she said softly. "I appreciate it." She turned to head back to her seat when Tim's voice boomed behind her, surprising both Amanda and Maria. "Miss Johnson, can I help you with anything else?" The question carried an edge, as though Amanda had broken some unwritten rule by venturing to the rear galley. Amanda turned slowly. "I was just getting some water," she said, holding up the bottle Maria had given her. Tim's gaze flicked from Amanda to Maria, then back to Amanda. He forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Right. Well, if you're ready to head back to your seat, It's recommended due to the turbulence. The tension in Tim's voice was palpable. Amanda gave him a cool nod, then returned to her seat. As she settled, she saw Tim lean in and whisper something to Maria, who stood with her arms crossed over her chest, shaking her head in a small gesture of dissent. The exchange ended with Tim storming back toward the front of the plane, leaving Maria looking flustered. Amanda clutched the water bottle, her nails biting into the plastic. She'd encountered countless forms of subtle racism in her life, but never had she been so directly challenged in such a short span. She focused on the hum of the aircraft, trying to quiet the storm in her mind. The seatbelt sign dinged again, the cabin lights flickering as the plane passed through another patch of rough air. Amanda closed her eyes. Just a couple more hours to Los Angeles, then I'll handle this. Except Tim seemed determined to provoke a confrontation before then. Minutes later, he appeared at Amanda's row, a forced cheeriness in his voice that made Amanda's skin crawl. "Miss Johnson, I'm going to have to ask you to remain in your seat unless it's an emergency. We've had complaints that you're roaming the cabin during turbulence." Amanda's eyes snapped up to him. "Complaints? I was just getting water from your colleague with the seatbelt sign off." Tim's smile was tight. "Yes, but the seatbelt sign was about to come on. We have to ensure everyone's safety. I'm sure you understand." Amanda's temper flared. She realized Tim was trying to paint her as a disruptive passenger, possibly building a case against her. She managed to keep her voice even. "I have no intention of roaming the cabin unnecessarily." "Thank you for your concern." Tim nodded, but there was a flicker of disappointment in his eyes, as if he'd hoped Amanda would retaliate or argue. He walked away, leaving Amanda seething. She recognized the tactic, gaslighting to provoke a reaction, then using that reaction to justify further harassment. Amanda took a long, slow breath. She reached for her phone, which was on airplane mode, and opened her notes again. She typed the time and Tim's exact words, summarizing what had just happened. She was building a case meticulously. They have no clue who they're dealing with. Across the aisle, the businessman in 4B watched with a mixture of curiosity and empathy. When Amanda glanced his way, he offered a sympathetic nod. She wondered if he'd overheard any of Tim's snide remarks, or if he just sensed that Amanda was being singled out. Just a little longer, she told herself. Then the tables will turn. An hour before landing, the flight started its descent into LAX. The captain's voice announced they'd be arriving slightly ahead of schedule. Normally, Amanda would welcome an early arrival, but now she felt a wave of relief. She wanted off this plane, away from Tim's toxic presence. And yet, a steely part of her wanted a resolution before she set foot on the ground. Outside the window, the setting sun cast a fiery glow over the horizon, painting the clouds in shades of orange and red. Amanda gazed at the spectacle, hoping it would calm her nerves. Her mind spun with possible ways to confront Tim and Kelly. She wanted them held accountable, not just for her own sake, but for any future passenger who looked like her. Suddenly, Tim appeared in the aisle again, handing out landing cards to those who might need them. He approached Amanda with that same forced smile. "Do you need a landing card, Miss Johnson?" Amanda cleared her throat. "I'm a domestic traveler, so no, I don't need one." Her voice was calm, though she felt anything but. Tim hovered, fiddling with the sheaf of cards. "Right. Well, we'll be on the ground soon. I hope you enjoyed your flight." Amanda raised her eyebrows. "It was eventful, I'll say that." Tim opened his mouth to respond, but Kelly called from the galley, interrupting him. He turned on his heel, leaving Amanda, once again, with frayed patience. As the plane made its final approach, Amanda gathered her belongings, preparing for landing. She had her seatbelt securely fastened, tray table locked, and seat in the upright position. Tension coiled in her stomach like a viper. She considered letting the incident slide, simply writing a scathing review or filing a complaint after disembarking. But Amanda was a woman of action, and she'd overheard enough from Tim to know that he'd probably done this to other passengers who didn't fit his biased assumptions. If she let him off, who would be next? The wheels touched down at LAX with a chirp. Passengers exhaled collectively, some stirring from slumber, others stretching and checking their phones. Amanda glanced at the time, 6:42 p.m., local. She had enough time before her next engagement. As soon as the seatbelt sign was turned off, Amanda stood, retrieving her carry-on. Kelly made eye contact, then quickly looked away, her cheeks coloring. Tim busied himself with opening the overhead bins for other passengers. Amanda's mind was made up. She would confront them at the door, where the flight crew usually gathered to say goodbye. There, Amanda would reveal her identity in the simplest possible way, a business card or a direct statement. And then she would watch their faces shift from smug to horrified. Passengers began filing out. Amanda waited until the aisle cleared a bit, determined not to block anyone in. Finally, when it was her turn, she stepped forward. Tim and Kelly stood at the aircraft door, forced smiles at the ready. "Thank you for flying with us," Tim said mechanically to the passenger ahead of Amanda. When Amanda reached them, she paused. Kelly's smile faltered. Tim's eyes flickered uncertainly, and Amanda, for the first time in hours, felt entirely in control. She extended her hand, a small white business card pinched between her fingers. Tim and Kelly glanced at it, then at Amanda. "My name is Amanda Johnson," she said, her voice calm yet unyielding. "Vice President of Corporate Ethics and Human Capital at Sterling Clark Holdings." Tim's face went blank, confusion turning to a flicker of concern. Kelly's eyes darted between Amanda and the card, which Amanda was still holding out. Passengers behind Amanda murmured, waiting to exit, so Amanda stepped aside, effectively moving Tim and Kelly out of the direct path. "I overheard your conversation about me in the galley," Amanda said quietly, her words hitting like a slow drumbeat. "The insults, the insinuations, the racism. I've documented everything." Kelly's mouth opened, eyes wide in horror. Tim's cheeks flushed. "Miss Johnson, Amanda cut him off. "You assumed I didn't belong in business class because of the color of my skin. You tried to provoke me, to find any excuse to remove me from this flight, simply because I challenged your bias by existing in a seat you thought I didn't deserve." Kelly stammered, I'm sorry, Miss Johnson. This is a misunderstanding." Amanda locked eyes with her, unwavering. "No, it's not. I heard every word." Tim looked around, noticing a few curious passengers. He hissed under his breath, "We should discuss this off the plane. Please, Miss Johnson." Amanda gave a curt nod. "I plan to. But first, you should know that I'm part of the oversight board for major transportation entities under the Sterling Clark umbrella. If I report this behavior, which I will, you'll be subject to disciplinary action, possibly termination." Kelly's eyes welled with tears. "Please, Miss Johnson, can we talk about this?" We didn't mean," Amanda shook her head, gesturing for them to follow her into the jet bridge. "Let's not hold everyone up." They stepped into the jet bridge, other passengers glancing with curiosity as they passed. Once they were off the plane and out of earshot, Amanda turned to face them, her posture as commanding as any executive behind a boardroom table. "I've dealt with bigotry before," she said softly, "but rarely so blatantly from a service provider. You not only insulted me, but you did so while representing an airline with a strong anti-discrimination policy. That is unacceptable." Kelly was trembling, tears threatening to spill. Tim's mouth was set in a grim line. "Miss Johnson, we were just, look, I'm sorry if we offended you, but—" Amanda held up a hand. "I'm not interested in your justifications. I'm interested in accountability." With that, she reached into her carry-on and pulled out a slim leather folder. From it, she drew 2 crisp sheets of paper letters that had the Sterling Clark Holdings letterhead. She'd prepared these letters in anticipation of a different scenario, an internal matter at a subordinate company that required swift termination. But the structure and authority were the same. She held the letters out, each bearing a stark, bold heading, Notice of Termination. Tim and Kelly both stared, their eyes wide in disbelief. "Are these," Kelly whispered, her voice cracking. "Draft copies," Amanda clarified. "I have the authority to enact them if I choose. Both of your names can be placed on these letters with minimal effort. The question is whether I choose to do so." Tim swallowed hard. "Miss Johnson, we never intended. This was a misunderstanding. Please. This is our livelihood." Amanda's gaze swept from Tim to Kelly, neither daring to breathe. The power dynamic had flipped completely, and Amanda felt the weight of that power. She didn't relish cruelty. She had dedicated her career to fairness and justice. But she also knew that people like Tim and Kelly often only learned when faced with real consequences. "We can discuss your futures," Amanda said, "but not here. I'll be speaking with your supervisor and filing a formal complaint. Then we'll decide if you remain employees of this airline." Kelly let out a small sob, burying her face in her hands. Tim stood there, shell-shocked, eyes glistening with fear and regret. Amanda placed the draft termination letters back into the folder. "I suggest you both reflect on what happened here," she said quietly. "If I have my way, neither of you will be laughing at another black woman in business class again." With that, Amanda turned on her heel and walked away, leaving Tim and Kelly standing there, the swirl of travelers around them. She heard Kelly's muffled sobs and Tim's hollow attempts at consolation. A small part of Amanda felt pity, but she reminded herself this was the price of bigotry, a hard lesson that needed to be learned. Her heart pounded as she emerged into the terminal, merging with the sea of passengers. A swirl of relief and adrenaline flooded her. She had kept her composure and stood up for herself in the most direct way possible. And yet the story was far from over. Amanda's phone buzzed with a message from her driver, confirming he was waiting at the curbside pickup. But Amanda had one more thing to do before leaving LAX. She opened an email draft she'd composed mid-flight, addressing it to the airline's internal oversight department, copying a contact at Sterling Clark who oversaw the partnership with United Airlines. Amanda typed quickly, "Subject: formal discrimination complaint, flight crew behavior to whom it may concern. My name is Amanda Johnson, Vice President of Corporate Ethics and Human Capital at Sterling Clark Holdings. During my recent flight, United Airlines Flight 478 Seat 4A on date, I experienced discriminatory behavior from members of the cabin crew. Attached is a detailed account of the incidents, including direct quotes overheard in the galley. I request an immediate investigation and will be following up to discuss appropriate disciplinary action. Regards, Amanda Johnson." She attached the notes she'd taken, along with any audio recordings she had managed to discreetly capture with her phone. She'd turned on the voice memo app at one point, hoping to document Tim's confrontation. Satisfied, she hit send. A ping confirmed the email was delivered. Now Amanda could breathe a little easier. She proceeded to baggage claim to see if her checked luggage had arrived. As she walked, she felt the heavy swirl of emotions: anger, vindication, sadness, triumph. This was not just about her. It was a stand for everyone who had ever been singled out for their skin color, especially in a place where they had every right to be. When she finally met her driver at the curb, Amanda slid into the back seat of a sleek black sedan. Exhaling a long sigh, she closed her eyes, letting the city lights of Los Angeles wash over her. A swirl of relief and weariness pressed down on her shoulders. She reflected on the day's events and considered what might happen next. The airline would launch an internal inquiry. Tim and Kelly would likely face suspension, if not immediate termination. Amanda didn't relish the idea of people losing their jobs, but she also knew that enabling bigotry only allowed it to fester. If Tim and Kelly truly regretted their actions, perhaps the airline would permit them a second chance under strict conditions. But that was for the airline to decide, guided by Amanda's complaint and testimony. Later that evening, Amanda checked into her hotel in downtown Los Angeles, a swanky high-rise overlooking the shimmering skyline. In her room, she flung her trench coat onto a plush armchair and sank into the bed, exhausted. She stared at the city lights, her mind replaying the confrontation in the jet bridge. She had wanted so badly to avoid conflict when she boarded that flight. All she desired was a peaceful journey, a chance to read and rest before diving back into work. Yet, maybe this was exactly what was supposed to happen. As Vice President of Corporate Ethics, Amanda was not just a figurehead. She was there to enforce the very standards she championed. She checked her email one last time before drifting to sleep. The airline's oversight department had already acknowledged receipt of her complaint, promising a swift and thorough investigation. Amanda closed the email, letting a sense of vindication wash over her. Tomorrow, she'd have meetings related to her new role, discussing strategic initiatives, budgets, and personnel reorganizations. But tonight, Amanda slept with the knowledge that she had stood up for herself in the face of prejudice, and that the flight crew who laughed at her would now have to face the consequences of their own actions. Amanda awoke to her phone buzzing with notifications. Overnight, the wheels of corporate accountability had already begun turning. She sat up in the luxurious hotel bed, blinking at the bright California sun streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Her phone displayed a flurry of emails. One was from the Director of Internal Audits at United Airlines, requesting a phone call at her earliest convenience. Another was from her own team at Sterling Clark, expressing support and asking how they could help. Amanda also saw a message from a colleague who had already heard rumors circulating about a high-profile passenger incident involving discriminatory behavior by flight attendants. News traveled fast in corporate circles. She swung her legs off the bed, heart pounding at the thought of stepping back into the ring so soon. Part of her yearned for a day off to let the emotional exhaustion pass, but Amanda had never been one to shrink from a challenge. If the airline was ready to discuss immediate actions, she was ready to provide her full account and ensure the right measures were taken. She freshened up, dressed in a tailored navy suit, businesslike but approachable, and made her way to a quiet corner of the hotel lounge to take the call with the United Airlines Director of Internal Audits, a man named Richard Leeson. As soon as Amanda confirmed her identity, Richard's voice crackled through the phone. "Miss Johnson, thank you for your time. I want to assure you that your complaint is being taken very seriously. We've already pulled flight records, and we're in the process of interviewing the crew. We wanted to speak to you first." Amanda took a measured breath. "Thank you, Mr. Leeson. I appreciate the prompt response. I've submitted a detailed account of what transpired, including my notes and some audio I captured. Yes, we've reviewed that. It's disturbing, to say the least." Richard's tone had a genuine note of remorse. "This behavior is unacceptable. We have clear anti-discrimination policies, and we will be taking appropriate measures. We'd like to know what outcome you'd consider just." Amanda paused, choosing her words carefully. "I believe in fairness and accountability. The flight attendants in question displayed blatant prejudice and harassment. If your investigation confirms my account, which I am confident it will, I expect them to face disciplinary actions, up to and including termination." Richard exhaled audibly on the other end. "Understood. We'll keep you informed at every stage. And I want to apologize on behalf of United Airlines. This is not how we treat our passengers, nor is it reflective of our values." Amanda nodded, even though he couldn't see her. I appreciate that. My hope is that you use this incident as a springboard for retraining and reinforcing your policies with all crew members, not just the ones involved. This can be a learning moment. That's our intention, Richard assured her. We'll be reaching out to your office as well. We value your perspective as a leading professional in corporate ethics. Perhaps there's room for a collaborative approach going forward. Amanda's lips twitched in a small smile. I'm open to discussing that. They wrapped up the call shortly after, Richard promising to follow up once he had more details. Amanda set her phone on the table, taking a sip of the hotel's strong coffee. She felt a rush of relief, tempered by the lingering sting of the flight crew's words. Change always starts with confrontation, she reminded herself. 3 days later, Amanda sat in her office at Sterling Clark's Los Angeles branch, a top-floor space with panoramic views of the city. She had spent the morning in back-to-back meetings covering a range of human capital issues, but her mind occasionally drifted to Tim and Kelly, wondering how the inquiry was proceeding. Her assistant pinged her that she had a phone call from United Airlines corporate. Amanda closed her laptop and picked up. "This is Amanda Johnson. Miss Johnson." "Hi, it's Richard Leeson again," came the now familiar voice. "I wanted to update you on our investigation." Amanda's heartbeat quickened. "Yes, of course. Please go ahead." She heard him shuffle papers. "We interviewed the entire crew and some passengers who witnessed the interactions. We also reviewed your audio recording. Based on the evidence, we've concluded that Tim Walters and Kelly Monroe violated our professional conduct and anti-discrimination policies. They repeatedly targeted you, questioned your right to be in business class, and made derogatory remarks referencing your race. This is intolerable." Amanda inhaled, prepared for the next part. "And the consequences?" Richard cleared his throat. "Effective immediately, both employees have been terminated. United Airlines does not tolerate discriminatory behavior. We're also conducting additional training sessions for all flight attendants to prevent such incidents from recurring. We appreciate your courage in bringing this to our attention." A wave of conflicting emotions hit Amanda. Part of her was relieved that justice had been served. Another part felt the heaviness of two people losing their jobs. But Amanda recalled Tim's hateful words and Kelly's complicity. "Actions have consequences," she reminded herself. "Thank you for following through," Amanda said. "I do hope you'll implement meaningful changes to prevent future incidents." "We will," Richard promised. "And if it's all right with you, we'd like to discuss a possible advisory role for you in updating our anti-discrimination training. There's interest from our upper management, given your expertise." Amanda allowed herself a small, hopeful smile. "I'd be open to that conversation. Send me an email with the details." After hanging up, Amanda gazed out at the cityscape. Hard karma had come full circle for Tim and Kelly. They laughed at a black woman in business class, only to be confronted with the fact that she wasn't just another passenger. They had insulted a high-ranking executive empowered to end their careers. Amanda took no joy in their downfall, but she found satisfaction in the knowledge that their harmful behavior would not be brushed under the rug. She turned her attention back to her work, forging ahead in her new role. In the weeks that followed, Amanda collaborated with United Airlines on designing updated training modules for flight crews, focusing on inclusive service and unconscious bias. The irony was not lost on her that the same airline whose employees had discriminated against her was now looking to her for guidance. Sometimes, life had a poetic way of forcing institutions to learn from their mistakes, and so Amanda Johnson's journey continued, a testament that sometimes the greatest storms we face bring us the clarity we need to drive meaningful change. In the eyes of many, Amanda became a symbol of resilience and justice, But for her, it was simply another chapter in a life spent fighting for the respect and equality everyone deserves. Thank you for staying with me through this powerful story of triumph over prejudice. Amanda Johnson's confrontation in that airplane cabin showed us that bigotry can lurk anywhere, even behind the polite smiles of a flight crew. But it also taught us that standing up against injustice can lead to real consequences for those who harm others with their biases. While 2 flight attendants lost their jobs, this difficult lesson opened the door to genuine corporate reform, ensuring fewer travelers endure discrimination in the future. If this story moved you, if it made you think, or even if it inspired you to speak out more boldly in your own life, please show your support by liking this video, sharing it with your friends, and subscribing to my channel. Your engagement helps me create more impactful stories that shine a light on important social issues. Thank you again, and until next time.